and it included notes of statements that Donald Trump made about his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there is no reason for this to be hidden from the American people. There is no privilege, there is no attorney-client privilege, and I see you're checking with your staff, and I can assure you, staff, this is not under attorney-client privilege because it was sent from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. Will you commit to publicly providing the unredacted version of this so that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Sometimes the most powerful question is the one that has no good answer. When Dan Goldman stood up, the energy in the House Judiciary Committee shifted. Former federal prosecutor, led counsel in Trump's first impeachment case, now congressman from New York. He has a document in his hand, an email, and in that email, there's something Attorney General Pam Bondi can't explain. Attorney General Bondi, Goldman's voice is measured but firm. I want to show you something from the files your department released. The room goes quiet, not the routine questioning quiet. The tense quiet of people recognizing that something real is about to happen. Goldman continues, holding up the document. This is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. According to the portions your department didn't redact, this email discusses statements that Donald Trump made about his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He pauses, letting that sink in. An email from Epstein himself to his co-conspirator Maxwell. An email discussing what Trump publicly said about their relationship. But as you can see, Goldman raises the document higher, turning it toward the cameras. Large portions of this email are redacted. The American people cannot read what Jeffrey Epstein wrote about Donald Trump's statements. Another pause. Deliberate. Prosecutorial. So the question I'm asking you is very simple. Will you commit to publicly releasing the unredacted version of this email? So that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Feel the shape of that question. Not, can you explain the redactions? Not, what is your transparency policy? Will you release the evidence that proves Trump lied? Yes or no? And Bondi's response is when everything explodes. Bondi doesn't answer the question. Not even close. You're about as good a lawyer today as you were when you tried to impeach President Trump in 2019. Did you apologize for that? Personal attack. Immediate. Reflexive. The move of someone who can't answer the question and knows it. Goldman doesn't take the bait. Attorney General, I asked you a yes or no question. Will you release the unredacted email? Bondi keeps going. Congressman, you've spent years attacking this president with false accusations. Attorney General, Goldman tries to interrupt. Bondi talks over him. And now you want to talk about transparency when Merrick Garland sat silently. Attorney General, Goldman's voice rises. Will you answer the question? Bondi doesn't stop. She keeps attacking Goldman's record, deflecting to the Biden administration, pivoting to unrelated cases. And that's when Goldman does something that shocks the entire room. He shouts one word loud enough to cut through Bondi's deflection and stop her mid-sentence. Quiet. The hearing room erupts. Not applause, not boos. Chaos. Members scrambling. Chairman Jim Jordan banging the gavel, calling for order. Reporters typing frantically. Survivors in the gallery standing up, some with hands over their mouths because what just happened was unprecedented. A congressman, a former federal prosecutor who knows exactly how decorum works, just shouted down the Attorney General of the United States in the middle of her deflection. And he did it because Bondi refused to answer a direct question about evidence that Donald Trump lied about Jeffrey Epstein. Goldman isn't finished. When the room barely settles, he repeats the question. Attorney General Bondi, yes or no? Will you release the unredacted version of the email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell discussing Donald Trump's statements about their relationship? Bondi's face is tight. You can see the calculation. Answer the question honestly and admit she won't release it. That's a cover-up. Commit to releasing it. That exposes Trump. Attack Goldman again. She already tried that and got shouted down. She chose option 3 anyway. Congressman, there are legal standards that govern redactions in these files. And I am not going to sit here and be lectured by someone. Goldman cuts her off. That's not a yes. That's a no. You will not release the email. The American people should understand. The Attorney General just refused to release evidence that contradicts President Trump's public statements about Jeffrey Epstein. There are moments in congressional hearings that define entire investigations. Not because something gets proven in that room, nothing gets proven in congressional hearings, but because something gets exposed about who is protecting whom and why. This was one of those moments. Dan Goldman had just done something remarkably simple and devastatingly effective. He showed evidence that the Department of Justice possesses information about Trump's lies regarding Epstein. And he got Bondi on the record refusing to make that information public. This isn't speculation. This is documentation. The email exists. Epstein wrote it. It discusses Trump's statements. The Justice Department redacted it. And when asked to release it, Bondi said no. Pattern established. Evidence documented. Cover-up confirmed. And Goldman made sure every camera in that room captured it. But here's what makes this moment even more significant. And this is the detail most coverage is missing. Before Goldman did this, he did something else. He asked the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse sitting in the gallery, survivors who had tried to contact the Justice Department, who had requested meetings, who had information to share about their abusers, to stand up and raise their hands if the Justice Department refused to respond to them. Every single one stood up. Every single one raised their hand. Bondi sits at the witness table facing forward, not looking at them. Goldman let the silence hang. Let the cameras capture it. Survivors standing, Bondi ignoring them. And then he transitioned to the email. Do you see the structure of what Goldman just did? First, show that Bondi ignores survivors who have information about Epstein's network. Then, show that Bondi hides information about Trump's lies regarding Epstein. The pattern isn't subtle. The Justice Department under Bondi protects powerful men and ignores the people Epstein hurt. This isn't a partisan argument. This is what happened in that room, documented on camera, with Bondi sitting 10 feet away, unable to deny it. Goldman also pointed to another document during his questioning, an email the Justice Department released containing a list of Epstein victims' names. The list was supposed to be redacted to protect the victims. But when the Justice Department released it, only one name on the entire list was blacked out. The rest fully visible, exposed, published for the world to see. This is clearly intentional, Goldman said, to intimidate these survivors and victims. Think about what that means. An email with multiple victims' names. The Justice Department is supposed to protect victim privacy. They redact one name, leave the others exposed. Either this is catastrophic incompetence, which raises questions about Bondi's ability to run the department, or it's intentional, which raises questions about whether the Justice Department is using exposure as intimidation. Neither answer is acceptable, and when Goldman pressed Bondi on it, Bondi denied intentionality but couldn't explain how such a specific error happened. One name redacted, all others exposed. That doesn't happen by accident when you're processing millions of documents through multiple review layers. That happens when someone makes a choice. Now let me tell you the next stage because this story is accelerating. The email Goldman referenced is now a matter of public record. It exists. We know it exists because Goldman held it up and Bondi didn't deny its existence. We know it discusses Trump's statements about Epstein because the unredacted portions say so. We know the Justice Department is hiding the full contents because Goldman asked and Bondi refused. That means the next step is obvious. Legal pressure to force the release. Subpoena, court order, congressional demand. The Epstein Files Transparency Act already requires full disclosure. If the Justice Department is withholding material that contradicts presidential statements about a sex trafficking investigation, that's not discretionary redaction. That's obstruction. And Goldman, who was a federal prosecutor before being a congressman, knows exactly how to build that case. Here's what we know for certain. Jeffrey Epstein wrote an email to Ghislaine Maxwell. That email discusses statements Donald Trump made about his relationship with Epstein. The Justice Department has that email. They released a redacted version. When asked to release the full version, the Attorney General refused. This isn't a theory. This is what happened on camera in a congressional hearing. And the only reason you redact evidence that contradicts someone's public statements is because releasing it would prove they lied. If the email supported Trump's version of events, if it showed Trump was telling the truth about barely knowing Epstein, about kicking him out of Mar-a-Lago, about ending their friendship years ago, Bondi would have released it in a heartbeat. The fact that she won't tells you everything you need to know about what Epstein actually wrote. The hearing continued for another hour after Goldman's questioning. Other members asked other questions but the energy had shifted. Goldman had broken through the partisan theater and shown something real. evidence being hidden, survivors being ignored, and an attorney general who would rather shout over a congressman than answer a yes or no question about transparency. By the time the hearing ended, approximately 6 hours after it started, the clip of Goldman shouting, "Quiet," at Bondi was already going viral. Not because of the spectacle, but because of what it represented. A prosecutor forcing accountability, a congressman refusing to accept deflection, and an attorney general caught protecting the president instead of pursuing the truth. 7 minutes. That's all it took for Dan Goldman to ask one question, present one piece of evidence, and expose the entire strategy Bondi has been using to protect Trump from the Epstein files. Don't answer, attack the questioner, talk over them, run out the clock. It worked on other members. It didn't work on Goldman because Goldman is a prosecutor. He knows when someone is hiding evidence. He knows what it looks like when a witness can't answer a simple question. And he knows that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a hearing is ask a question that has no good answer, and then force the person to sit in the silence when they refuse to respond. The email exists. Bondi won't release it. Survivors are being ignored, and Dan Goldman made sure the entire country knows it.